This is Curious Incident, a podcast for special needs families and your window into the world of special education. Special needs parenting can be challenging, and we want to make it easier by providing you with the resources you need to help your child. Let's delve deep into the world of learning differently with your host, Special Education Attorney Adam Dayan.
I want to welcome back Heather Deutsch to the Curious Incident podcast. Heather was our guest on episode 19 about pursuing adult services. Today, Heather will be speaking with me about siblings' emotional journey when growing up with a special needs family member. Heather worked in the public school system teaching first and second grade for 15 years before marrying and raising her family. When her children went off to high school, she began her second career teaching nursery school, which led to her current profession of parenting coach. Heather, thank you so much for being back here with us today.
My pleasure.
You are passionate about coming back on the podcast to talk about sibling dynamics in families where they're growing up with a special needs family member. Why is this topic important to you?
Adam, it's super important to me because having 4 children of my own, I have a set of triplets and another son. It's very, very important to be conscious of the typical children and all that they must endure being a sibling of a special needs child.
Remind our listeners, what are the dynamics of the children in your family?
As I said, I have 4 children. I have a set of triplets, 2 daughters and a son, and I also have a younger son. My triplet son has autism, nonverbal autism.
How old are the triplets now?
The triplets are 25, and my younger son is 19.
Okay. How did the siblings contribute and care for their special needs brother, Philip, in your family?
When my children were younger, Philip was one of the triplets. They played together, they interacted together, and they really, unbeknownst to me at that time, served as a role model for Philip, as a challenge and an example for Philip to follow with his challenges. As the children got older and it became more apparent what Philip's challenges were, they were always there to help, whether it was to supervise him if I had to be somewhere else in the house, or to help him with feeding or getting dressed or even bedtime. They were always there for me to help him. When my younger son was born and I was really more needing to be available to the baby, they really stepped it up and they did things that younger children really shouldn't have to take on. As far as if my son had an accident, my daughters would clean the accident, get him a change of clothing. If he woke up in the middle of the night and I was sleeping, they would come down to wake us to let us know he was up. They would hear him. At one point, they shared a room. So there was a lot of, I'm not going to call it pressure because we didn't put the pressure on them, but it was self-imposed pressure. In retrospect, now that I think about it, that was put on them to always have Philip in their scope of things.
Sounds like they felt the need to be there, pay attention, and respond to whatever he needed.
Yes, absolutely. Just organically, not because I put that on them.
Sure. Siblings can sometimes go into a spin emotionally when they have a special needs sibling. Has this been your experience? And if it has been, give our listeners a sense of what that can look like.
Well, whether the parents are aware of it as or not, and I'm one of those parents, the siblings of special needs people see everything and they're aware of everything. And you as a parent are so deeply involved that it's very hard for you to see clearly what your children are seeing. So there is this constant pressure and tension and also happiness. I mean, it's not all bad. There's always an awareness, let me say that, of the special needs person that lives with you, the sibling, the child, and there are times that your children will go into some sort of emotional state, whether it's being angry all the time or being quiet or lashing out or just keeping to themselves. It's something that just creeps up on you. You try to maintain as much of a normal and as much as a happy tone in the house as you can to keep things moving forward. But again, you as a parent are not seeing what your children are seeing, and it's a very big challenge on top of other challenges to be really aware of what is happening as much as you can control it.
In your experience, do these emotional states happen at a certain age or at a certain developmental milestone for your kids?
I think when the children were younger, Philip, my son, was just another person in the house, and his neediness, his challenges weren't as apparent. They knew that he was different, but it wasn't as much of, I don't even know what word to use. But it was just part of life. It was our normal. But then as they started to grow older and develop and become more social and, more academically involved, then things started to shift. And at that point, it was a lot of questions and a lot of concern for their brother and, when will he speak? And what is he learning in school? And who are his friends? And what is he going to do on the weekends? They became much more concerned for him. And I believe probably a sense of helplessness as well, and possibly a little guilt in there, because they were moving forward. And it was even more poignant because they are triplets. So there was this deep connection, and they knew where they should be at all the stages of their life. They saw how their lives were progressing, but they saw that Philip's life was stuck where it was.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the sacrifice that this required from them or of them?
Yes. I mean, simple things like going out for a family dinner were very, very rare for us as a family because my son wasn't very tolerant of noisy, overstimulating places. So typically in our house, in my life, as a child even, Sunday night was go out for dinner night. But we tried one or two times, and it was always extremely tense. Either my husband or I had to leave the restaurant with Philip, and the rest of the family got to stay on for the meal. And we decided that it didn't work. So we would order in every Sunday night, which is a treat as well. But I felt very badly that we couldn't have that simple pleasure. Family vacations, initially we did go as a family, and then when my son was about 6 years old, we had an extremely bad experience on the airplane, and that was the last time Philip traveled with us as a family. We would leave him behind when there were school vacations, or not go on a vacation if I couldn't find coverage for my son, and we just made the best of it at home. And weekends generally revolved around my son. It was very hard for me to take my other children out because I didn't have anyone at home to watch my son. So it was a lot on them to sacrifice the freeness and the easiness and the happiness that comes with, a weekend of no school and no homework.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into what your typically developing kids have shared with you as adults, but I just want to focus on when they were kids a little bit more. I get the sense that they didn't always share their feelings at the time, or any guilt or pressure they may have been feeling then. They didn't necessarily communicate. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, absolutely. They didn't express themselves because at that time they had a sense of obligation to just go with the flow and do what's best for Philip, because that's how it works in a special needs family. You're just always doing what's best for that special needs child. And they just went with it. They didn't complain. They didn't question. They went with it. And in retrospect, I respect that they didn't complain, but I also have a deep sense of guilt because it was something that I didn't see. You're so super focused on the special needs child, and you command subliminally that everybody else be the same.
We'll get into those feelings a little bit more soon. First, what does it mean to you when we talk about a parent paying attention to siblings' emotional needs and day-to-day needs?
Everyone has emotional needs and day-to-day needs, and it's really important that as a parent of a special needs child, you try your very best to remove yourself when you can emotionally from that special needs child and turn your attention to those needs of your typical children, because typically all of us go through so many changes in life and so many different feelings and emotions and challenges and obstacles and happy things as well, obviously, always. And a parent of a special needs child has to make a conscious effort of being aware of what stages your children are going through, raising them up when they have accomplishments, being there for them when things are not going as well as they want. As a parent of a special needs person, your patience and your tolerance are pulled very thin. If your typical child has something that's bothering them and you know it's not a big deal in life, but it is a big deal to them, you can't brush it off. You must regroup and get into it for whatever it is. Their friend didn't call them, they did poorly on a test, they missed the bus in the morning. You have to be there. You have to feel it with them. You cannot diminish their feelings. You have to respect, and you cannot diminish anything they're going through.
Not an easy feat in this type of situation where you're juggling so much, but important nonetheless. How can a parent achieve balance among their children in this way?
I think by humanizing yourself, by letting your children see that you're a person with emotions, that you're not a robot, you're not a machine, telling them your side of the story, where you're coming from, apologize if you have to at times for overlooking something that may have been important to them, just really bringing them into your head, not so deeply, but really humanizing yourself, explaining, if you have to cry in front of them, you cry. If you want to talk happy stuff, but you have to make yourself a real person for your children.
I think this is so important and interesting at the same time on a lot of levels. And I'm thinking about my own childhood when my parents would share certain information or not share certain information, try to be strong, try to protect us, whatever the case may be. And I feel in normal circumstances, I don't want to use the normal, but in any circumstances, it's a difficult and challenging balance. So, if you're talking to other parents in this type of situation, they're raising a special needs child and trying to balance things among all of their children. How do they strike that balance? What you're saying about being human, and they're concerned about not sharing too deeply because they don't want to maybe scare their kids or what have you. What tips do you have? How do they do that practically?
I think you have a conversation with your children and you get their point of view and you get information from them, how they see things in the house, how they view that special needs sibling, what you could bring from them information as well, how they think things could be handled. I remember in my own life, because we are so protective of my special needs son, we tended to treat him like a baby. We would speak to him in typical tones, but the way we treated him was not age appropriate for where he was at certain stages, whether he was 6 and I was dressing him, or he was 9 and I still made sure to wipe his mouth when he was eating. even walking with him in the street, holding his hand when he was 15, my children, would point out to me, Ma, he's 15, you shouldn't hold his hand. He's a young boy. He's a teenager. You have to walk next to him. He could do it himself. Don't. So getting that information from your children helps them to, let it go and feel more as a together unit than the mother is in charge and we all have to listen and we can't bring up any points. You just want to have like an open, flowing conversation that we're all on the same page. We all love one another and we all want to move each other forward. That's
so open to feedback. You're human. You're not necessarily perfect in all circumstances. And if your children are telling you, hey, don't do that, or that's not appropriate for him, or something that you maybe weren't attuned to, taking that in and responding to it.
Yes, absolutely. And it's very helpful because you only see your side of the story. And when you see your children and they're giving you things and information that you don't necessarily see, it's an eye-opener and it's helpful, more helpful than anything else. They're living day to day with you. They, of all people, see it. They get it. And it's important to me. Nice.
What expectations should parents have for their typically developing children who are the siblings of a special needs child?
It's not, you can't have expectations because, like specific expectations, because everybody is growing and developing and doing what they have to do at their own pace. We all want our children to move forward and become productive members of society, but it's hard to say what you expect because there are so many bumps in the road and highs and lows in a special needs family that it's hard to really use that word expectations. I think you have to be open to change. You have to be open to whatever comes your way. It's hard to really express the expectations because being a special needs parent, you really never know what to expect. So it's not so easy to talk about that, but you have to hope that everybody is on the same team and feels the same love towards one another and has a healthy balance in their head to grow up hopefully strong and centered so that they could focus on their own lives and not just always have their special needs sibling in their head.
Do you think that your typically developing children became more adaptable than they otherwise would have been because of this nature of their childhood?
Absolutely, yes. There's not a doubt in my mind. I always say that my son, Philip, raised my other children. I'll say it always, forever. It was not me and not my husband. My son gave them empathy, patience, kindness, an acceptance of everything and everyone. And really, they learned how to adapt to any situation. There is nothing, they don't complain, they figure it out, and they just keep moving forward. I see so many different typical offspring of other families, and I really thank God that my children turned out the way they did. And there's not a doubt in my mind that this could have happened if my son wasn't in our lives. No way.
I've got some tears in my eyes, not going to lie. What beautiful gifts he gave them.
Yes.
Philip, man, give me some of that.
Philip is my hero. He is my hero. If anyone asks me, who do you look up to? It's him. He is it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Heather, talk about how you viewed your experience of raising your typically developing children then when you were in the throes of helping Philip versus how you view your experience of raising them now in retrospect.
When my children were younger and most of my focus was on Philip, they became very independent and also very dependent on one another because I simply did not have the head to focus on them. They did things for one another and with one another, thankfully, that I could not be a part of because all of my attention was focused on my son. When my baby came along, as I said earlier, the older ones took care of him. Not the baby stuff, but the playing with him, the bathing, because everything was devoted to Philip. I will say that I was very, I don't know if I could say stubborn. I don't know if I could say I was stubborn or if I was just in denial, but I insisted on doing everything myself. I was primary caretaker for my son for 20 years. So that didn't give me a lot of wiggle room to do what I would have probably have done had everything turned out differently. I remember even my daughters, picking out clothing when teenagers want to go shopping and do all that. I just didn't have the head. I didn't have the time. And they just leaned on each other, and thank God for the internet, and they figured it out on their own. It's probably something I would have wanted to do in retrospect, but I couldn't. And they just, even homework, I was never there to help them with homework. They helped each other. Thank God. They were wonderful honor students, and they all rose to the occasion, thankfully. No one rebelled. Nobody was angry outwardly that I was aware of, but they did it. Now, fast forward, and they're older. My son is no longer living in our house, and the vibe in the house has changed enormously, and it's not something that I was aware of, how high pressure intense our household was, but now it's just this very loosey-goosey, relaxed atmosphere. There's no, where's Philip? What's he doing? Is it time for meds? Did you hear that? Everyone sleeps late on the weekends, and dinner is, dinner. There's no jumping up from the table a million times to see where my son is. Even Shabbat dinners, we would have always by me. I always host. And I did that primarily because I wanted Philip to be around family and always see what that looked like. All holidays are always in our home because I wanted Philip to be around people and see a holiday, and I never wanted to leave him behind. But very often he would come down the steps in the middle of a meal, sometimes dressed, sometimes not, and we were always on edge. And now it's just such a different vibe, and there is a hole and there is an emptiness. There's definitely, we're not partying. We miss him terribly. But my children, all three of them, are very happy that Philip is in a place, a home, where he is with his peers and where attention could be given to him all day, every day by professionals who are trained to do just that.
So Philip is in a home with his peers, and you have your three typically developing children home with you now.
I do. Full house.
So this is a great segue. You shared with me that your children have opened up to you in their later years now that they're grown adults and Philip is not their daily responsibility anymore. So talk a little bit more about what have they shared with you lately? What have you learned about the pressure they felt growing up with a special needs child who required a great deal of care?
Okay. When Philip moved out and when we were at a point where he could come back to visit, when I knew he was coming, I would let everybody know that he was coming. And then when he arrived, I would intercom everybody in their rooms. Philip's here, come down, let's hang with Philip. And to me, that was, what everyone was looking forward to. And we're supposed to do that because we're one big happy family again. But one of my daughters, about 2-3 weeks after having done that consecutively, opened up to me and she said, I don't want to come down and see Philip every single time he's here. I need to relax. I'll come down when I want to. I don't want to come down because you're telling me to. I can't. And it really blew my mind and opened up a whole different point of view for me. And all these feelings came rushing at me that, here I thought I was doing the right thing, and I was bringing us together as one big happy family again, but it wasn't the way my children felt when I wanted them to feel that. They do love him, they do miss him, they do want to be with him, but on their terms, not on my terms. And it was weighing on me, so I had a conversation with all of them, a formal, in the den family meeting, and let's talk. And it came out that they always felt this pressure to not make waves, to not complain, to do extremely well in school, to just be as perfect as they could so as not to disturb me, even, if they weren't feeling well, if something was bothering them. They really kept it to themselves. And when I thought about it, they were right, because I always say I had these perfect children. Hashem blessed me with these perfect children because they never complained. Nothing ever really truly went wrong. And that was not the case at all. They really kept it together and felt, because they were seeing all that my husband and I were going through, which my husband and I did not see. As you go through it, you don't see it. They saw it, and they kept quiet. They kept quiet.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a wow.
And how long ago was this that you had this meeting or these conversations with your kids? About
a year ago. A year ago when Philip moved, away, out. It was about a year ago. So it was recently. It was very recently.
What can parents do to address these emotions and help siblings know they are loved unconditionally, even if that means they want to spend less time caring for their sibling and more time figuring out their own identity and place in the world?
I think it's really important for parents to see their children as the individuals that they are. And it's very easy to lean on your typical children to help you, which there's nothing wrong with that. They should be involved. But you have to really try to draw the line, set the boundary for yourself upon your typical children. Ask their help when they need it, but really focus on who they are as people, as they're developing, what they like, what they don't like. Get involved as much as they'll let you in. Really create a safe environment and a guilt-free environment, and raise them up when they need to be raised, and do things with them and take them places, a dinner out, a walk in the park, just to make them understand that you're their parent as well, and you are as much available for them as you are for your special needs child.
Heather, what are your thoughts about revolving all activities around the special needs child's interests?
I think that as a special needs parent, it's very easy to do that because that child is always at the forefront of your thought processes, but it's also obviously not fair to the other children. I think everyone deserves their activities to be attended to, and as best as possible to foster any interests, hobbies that your typical children have. Allow them to be part of things, figure out how to take the special needs child out of the equation, and encourage the typical children to pursue the things that they like and get involved with the things that they like.
And how can parents ensure that their typically developing children have a life that's separate from their special needs siblings' life?
I think it's really important for those typical children to have friendships, encouraging friendships, and encouraging outside activities, school activities. Give them a life away from the special needs child. In my family, my son attended a school, and it was very important for me that they all get involved in the school as much as possible, doing charity events, making visits, taking the classmates to visit. And although at the time I felt I was doing the right thing because I wanted them to be very involved, I can now say that it's okay if your child is not so involved, because they have their own school, they have their own activities, and they deserve for that to be fostered and encouraged and to them to get involved with.
A lot of lessons here in what you're saying. You underscored the importance of allowing your typically developing children to have meltdowns, breakdowns, and all the fun stuff that's part of childhood and adolescence. We talked about this earlier when we were discussing emotional states. Can you say a few words about why this is so important, or what else you think parents should know on this topic?
The constant pressure and the intensity of a special needs house is a lot for typical children to bear. And again, I want to reiterate that when I say intensity, I don't mean that things are flying and the special needs child is having a meltdown. Just the fact that there is a special needs person in your home whose needs are special, that in itself creates the intensity. It's an underlying intensity. We had a happy home. We have a happy home, but that pressure is always there regardless, because it's just a fact of life, whether you like it or not. So it's very important to encourage your children to express themselves, and even if they don't express themselves, try as a parent to be aware of a change in behavior, a change in an attitude, the way they're speaking to you, and respect it. Don't admonish it. Give it the credit that it's due, and don't try to get into it, but just respect it and understand that it's a constant happening in their head and in their life in front of their eyes all the time. And if they need an escape, and if they want to go somewhere overnight or to a friend overnight or wherever they want to go, let it be. If they don't want to be part of the family outing, let it be. See where they're coming from and appreciate it and respect it.
Well said. I know you said it was hurtful to you that you couldn't see more clearly what was happening at the time. I'll say again here, as I've told you in the past, that I know you did your best in the moment and you need to give yourself some credit and some grace. Talk a little bit about what you wish you could have been able to see more clearly.
I think that when I was raising my son, I wasn't consciously trying to race against time, but it was a race against time in a way, not to make him well. I mean, he is well, healthy, not to make the autism go away, I should say, but just to move things forward and to try. I was always trying to normalize. We're great, we're good, we have a family photo, everything's okay, but it's not so. And I wish that I could have seen things as they were and not put as much pressure on myself to move everything forward all the time, and just to really accept and embrace the circumstances and just go with it and just let it flow.
Describe the idea of burnout from raising a special needs child.
Special needs children grow older chronologically, but in many cases their mental capacity does not match that growth. So you find yourself for years and years and years doing things that a typical child would have been able to do independently. For example, bathrooming. My son needs assistance in the bathroom. I, as I said earlier, was his primary caretaker. It's a lot to bear. It's a lot to put on yourself to think you can indefinitely take care of your special needs child on a level that is needed without feeling at some point exhausted, depressed, anxious. When will this end? And the answer is it most probably won't end as long as you're the primary caretaker. So I think that the burnout is inevitable because not only are you physically caring for your child, you're always mentally thinking the next step. What do you need to do? What school is he going to? What will he do for the summer? Do we have help after school? What if the help doesn't show up? Is he eating properly? In my case, my son is nonverbal. I have to think for him. I have to know what to expect. I have to look for signs. If he's not feeling well, what are the signs? How do I know the signs? There are so many things that you're constantly having to be made aware of that it's there. The burnout. I didn't know I was burnt out because it was my normal, but you get burned out. That's it.
And nobody's at their best when they're burnt out. Nobody can perform the way they would like to perform when they're burnt out. What do you think parents in similar circumstances can do to alleviate the burden and avoid burnout?
I think that having someone to help you is extremely important. It's something that's a given and it should never be cast aside. Even if you think you can do it, and even if your child is younger, which is how it begins when they're younger, you must, if you can, have assistance. And there is assistance available. It doesn't have to cost money. Special needs children are entitled to a bunch of services from the city, from the state, and it's all there to be given and taken. And you must have some sort of break, whether it's after school, whether it's in the morning, getting your children prepared for the day. Having that help really makes all the difference in the world.
And I think we talked about this on our previous episode together. The housing that you put in place for Philip was set up through a city agency or a city organization, and that has helped you create an environment where you can feel less burnt out and be more available to the needs of all your children.
Yes, that's exactly right. There are residential placements throughout the city, throughout the borough. It's a process. You have to put your name on a list. The list is years long. It's extremely important that you get your child's name on the list as soon as possible. Even if you can't fathom that part of your life happening, it most probably will, and that list is extremely important. And if having your child live home with you indefinitely is something you would prefer, then you need to put a staff in place as soon as possible for that as well, a staff, because no one person can help. You need shifts because they, like you, are human beings. They too will burn out, and you don't want that.
Where do you think the idea of self-care fits in for a parent in these circumstances? What about self-care for the siblings?
Self-care for a parent is extremely important on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be a spa treatment and a foot massage, but it has to be something that you enjoy for your own self. A walk in the park, getting your nails done, going for a smoothie, whatever it is, you have to take care of yourself every single day.
Nothing wrong with the massage and foot treatment though, right?
Nothing wrong. It's not my thing, but nothing wrong. And it sounds like a cliche, and I was told to take care of myself and do that. And honestly, initially, for many years, I did not do that because I didn't think I needed to, because I was this super mother. But you need it. And for the children, the siblings, they too need self-care. It presents differently, but they need a break. In our case, my children would go down to Florida. My typical children would go down to Florida to visit my parents. That was giving them the freedom, of being, in quotes, a normal house, not having to wake up early or have to worry about anything, just being themselves. Or we would take, you could take the special needs child out and leave the siblings in their home just to be comfortable and casual for a couple of hours a day, just to feel that relief of always thinking about the children, the sibling. There are special needs sleepaway camps, which, if your child is eligible and it's an appropriate setting, is a great fit. When we sent Philip, he was 10 years old. I was so emotional I couldn't even fill out the paperwork. The director of our school filled it out for me. And that first summer, I'm not going to lie, it was not amazing because I had so much guilt and so much anxiety about what is my nonverbal son doing, how do they know what he needs and wants, that it was not a pleasure. I think that my children appreciated that first summer, but for me, no. But going forward after that, I appreciated those 6 weeks. It was 6 weeks of, and it recharges you and it gets you ready to face what's coming after the summer.
I'm just curious which camp you went to. Do you want to say?
Sure. Camp Ask. Great. Excellent organization.
Heather, talk about the importance of being on the same page as your spouse or partner. You shared with me an example of a time you and your husband realized you were not on the same page. Can you talk about that some more?
Yes. Special needs children definitely put a strain on a marriage. There's no way around it. No way around it. It's very important for you and your spouse to talk openly and really get to it when it comes to where you are in the care of your special needs child. One of you can, there's always someone that's better at something in a marriage, that's stronger in something, but when it comes to a special needs child, you both have to be on the same team. One of you may be better at the day-to-day, and one of you may be better at the paperwork, or one of you want to spend more time doing the leisurely activities and the other one's doing the more practical stuff. But you have to think together and know that the only focus should be what's best for your child. In our case, I had thought at one point that my son possibly could go to a residential school, which is a place where you live and attend school at the same time. Things were getting very challenging at home, and it was really taking a toll on me and my husband. And my husband was adamantly against it. He refused to accept it and acknowledge it, and so my son continued to go to his school, which was wonderful, wonderful school, but it wasn't necessarily the appropriate setting at that point. I will say that I'm happy my husband did not agree, because my son gave us more and more blessings with every year that he lived with us. So I'm happy that we had that time together. But on top of all the pressure that you have raising your child and your other children, you cannot allow yourself to get into a battle with your husband or your wife. It won't do anyone good. It will just put such a terrible toll on your mental health that you cannot come out of it in a good way. You just can't.
Mm-hmm. I understand. What can parents do to be in sync regarding how they're approaching what's needed for all of their children?
Well, it's really important for you as parents to realize that in the family dynamic, there's so many moving parts, and a special needs family, you just multiply that by 1,000. It's really easy to use your special needs child as a blueprint for how to raise the family, but that isn't doing any justice to the typical children. You can't let the special needs child's needs rule the way the family is living. It cannot be the family dynamic. You have to remove yourself as much as possible. You never want to remove your child from the mix because he is part of the family or she is part of the family, so you don't want to treat it as separate family units, but you have to find a way to incorporate everybody's best interests to move the family forward. It can't be him or her and the rest of the children. It can't.
And in terms of being in sync with your spouse or partner?
It's not easy. It's constant work. You have to constantly work on it and think about it and talk about it and really look at the big picture and know that you're doing what's best for your children, all of them, and you have to be together. You have to be a unit. You can't be divided, because once your children see the division and hear the opposing views, it will not leave their thoughts, and you don't want them to hear one parent complaining and then embrace that and make that their view of their sibling. You want everyone to, it's not happy and it's not always butterflies and rainbows. There is good and bad, but the overall theme is to embrace what's going on and how can we make it better. Always trying to, how do we make it better? How can we move it forward? We can't, your side, my side. It will never, doesn't work.
Got it. How, as a parent, can you trust that the decision you're making is the right decision?
You have to hope that if you give it enough time and you put enough thought into the decisions that you have to make, that you're doing the right thing. It's very hard, especially in the case of a nonverbal child, because they cannot tell you their opinion and they cannot share with you how they feel. So you really have to think for your child and the circumstances that they are facing, and make the most educational, logical decision possible, and do your research and ask the questions and see how your special needs child is in that particular circumstance, and then take it from there. Personally, we've made some bad decisions. You only know in retrospect that the decision was bad. I mean, thank God they're few, but you never know. You just try your best. And even if you have a verbal special needs child, if they're a low-functioning child, they too can embrace exactly what's going on. So you most probably always have to think for them and hope that you're doing the right thing.
What resources would you recommend to parents trying to learn how to navigate this challenging territory of caring for a special needs child and giving typically developing siblings what they need?
So honestly, as far as resources, there are very few. I personally don't know of many. You
got to write the book.
Yeah, it's the truth. I think speaking to other parents in your position, speaking to administrators at school, the social worker, the mental health provider, is important as well. You cannot speak to a person that is not in this position. Very often people seek speaking to a psychologist or a friend or even a parent. But if those people don't understand the special needs dynamic and the special needs world, they really truly can't relate. As much as they are trying to and want to and mean well, only a person who really truly walked in these shoes could really truly give advice and empathize with what it is that you need help with. That's it.
You need a community of people going through the same thing.
Absolutely. It's the truth.
Any other advice or words of wisdom or encouragement for our listeners out there?
Yes, I absolutely do. Having a special needs child puts you through an extremely difficult process of highs and lows, emotionally, physically, mentally, and any feelings that you may have as a parent is never anything you should be ashamed of. Once you pass that initial shock, and it is a shock no matter how it is presented, and once you absorb it and understand what you're about to face, you have to try to see your child as the beautiful person that he or she is. Special needs children have so much to give, and they're so fully capable of living a full and beautiful life. And it's not a life that looks like yours. It's not a life that looks like mine. But they have so much waiting for them. And giving them the respect they deserve and appreciating them for who they are and what they are is so, so important. And it's also extremely important not to compare that special needs child to others that are their age, family members, classmates, your children's classmates. You cannot compare and you cannot think of what could have been, because there's no good in that. It doesn't help anybody. But really, I remember when my son was younger, I had so many emotions. I was angry. I was sad. I was a nervous wreck. I didn't know what was coming at me, and I was fighting it for a couple of years. I pulled him out of schools, in and out of different schools, kept trying to make it better. He went to about 4 schools in 3 years. And I remember when he was about 6 years old, it hit me, and I saw him so clearly. And my heart just opened up, and I just appreciated him as the little boy he was and the person he was to become. And he has so much there. He is kind, he is loving, he is silly and funny and gorgeous, and he's just a wonderful person. And if you could just see and appreciate that he's a different version of your other children, it will make it so much easier to accept and embrace it and just bring it all together and have the best life, live the best life for him, the others, and yourself.
Wow, that's beautiful and deeply moving. We'll end it here on that beautiful note. Heather, this is such an important topic that often gets overlooked. I'm so glad we've been able to shine a light on the sibling experience, and I know it will be helpful to our listeners who may be feeling some of the emotions you talked about. Thank you so much for being here again today.
It's my pleasure. It's my honor, and I really appreciate this. Thank you, Adam.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Curious Incident, a podcast for special needs families. Don't forget to subscribe for a new episode every month. For more resources and helpful information, check out our website and blog at dayanlawfirm.com. This podcast provides general information which is not intended to and does not constitute legal advice. You should not rely on this information for any purpose. For legal counsel, you should consult with an attorney to discuss your specific circumstances. Your listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the law offices of Adam Dayan, PLLC. No attorney-client relationship is established unless a retainer agreement has been executed between the client and the law offices of Adam Dayan. This podcast may constitute attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Any guests featured or resources mentioned on this podcast are for information purposes and are not endorsed by the law offices of Adam Dayan, PLLC.